This podcast is sponsored by Genelec. If you've ever been disappointed with the way your mixes sound on other playback systems, then check out Genelec's Unio monitoring ecosystem. By providing a seamless bridge between loudspeaker and headphone monitoring, Unio allows you to quickly create great sounding mixes that translate consistently, wherever you choose to work. No more guesswork, no more surprises, just truthful, accurate audio monitoring from stereo to immersive. To find out more, visit genelec.com/Unio, spelt UNIO. Your mixers will thank you for it.
Welcome to the Production Expert Podcast. I'm Ashea, and in this episode I have the pleasure of chatting with Andrew Scheps about Atmos, life in the UK, imposter syndrome despite being a 3-time Grammy Award winner, dealing with dick clients, and what the future holds for mixers and producers, and of course lots of great tips and tricks. Andrew also answers some of your questions, which will be revealed in part 2. Yes, this is going to be another 2-parter as we ended up chatting for a while again, and I didn't want to edit out the juicy bits, so here goes. Andrew, thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe some of our listeners don't actually realise that you're now based in the UK, so how are you finding it?
I love it. We're 5 minutes from where my wife grew up, so it's a part of the country we know really well. We've been coming here for 30 years, really. So the move was almost like not moving. We were just here more than back in LA, and we've been here full time more than 10 years now, which is sort of amazing to me.
Okay, wow. So it's not a recent thing.
No.
So do you feel kind of more sort of part British now that you've been here for 10 years?
I probably felt more British when I still drank because I was in the pub a lot.
Yeah. That's one of our traditions, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved British music and British comedy, and so I think my mom was a big Anglophile, and then obviously marrying someone who's English, I've been surrounded by it for a really long time, so it just feels really comfortable. I know I'm still the new guy, around here, which is fine, because I'm out in the country, so it's all very different from being in London.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Do you get people sort of saying that they love your accent?
Well, everyone thinks I'm Canadian now, which is weird. I think it must have, my accent has shifted a little bit. So
I actually can hear where they're coming from.
Well, I enunciate better now.
Yes.
I've actually say the letter T sometimes.
Talking of tea, do you drink a lot of tea now? Does your wife drink a lot of tea?
My wife drinks a lot of tea. I drink some tea, and this will horrify everybody, especially the Americans, but I really like instant decaf coffee. It's what I've settled on, and I'm so used to it that I really like it.
That's funny. And were you a big coffee lover when you lived in the States?
Yes. I mean, I was never a full-on coffee snob, but I used to drink a ton of coffee, and I think I had a life's worth of caffeine, and that's why I'm now doing decaf.
Yeah. I don't blame you. Fantastic. I know not all of us, enjoy routine. I certainly don't. But do you have a routine?
No.
Good. Good.
I mean, I'm super OCD about stuff, but for work, I have processes that I do for setting up sessions. I mean, that's a very precise operation that needs to happen and things like that. But in terms of the day, no, I get up early-ish, usually do some sort of exercise thing, and then I work on whatever the day is bringing me. And it's just different all the time. So it's, yeah.
That's good to hear, because I think we hear a lot about, people's routines and how important a routine is. But I think a lot of creative types, we don't actually like routine. And like you say, we can be very OCD and have processes. But having a routine, I find it sort of puts unnecessary pressure.
It can. I mean, I think for some people, it's the structure of it, which is really good. When I was still in LA and I was still mixing on a console, there was definitely more of a routine. I would get up, I'd be in the studio by 9:30 or so, and I would try and stop at dinner, but sometimes I would go back in the studio. And it was much more structured, I think, because the work was more structured. You were working on a song, it needed to be done by a certain time so you could get on to the next song. Whereas now, it's just chaos. I'm mixing everything that I have all the time. And when I don't have stuff to mix, I'm writing code, and like there's just always stuff going on. But I don't even like to tie myself down to doing a particular thing in a week for work. I do everything when I get to it, and when a project comes in, all I want to know is, when will you have everything I need so I can start, and when do you need it finished by? And that's it. And then all the time within that is just whatever happens.
I like that. And I have a question for you. How do you think, in terms of, for you at least, how, in terms of creativity, was having a routine less beneficial creatively for you?
I don't know. I think because the work itself is so different when I'm mixing, 15 songs at a time rather than one, that it's hard to compare, really. There are things that were really good about it because you just focused on that one thing and you did it until it was done, and then you moved on to the next thing, which is completely different to what I do now, where I've just got a mountain of stuff, and then big, like, packets of stuff gets done and gets taken off the mountain, and then some other stuff goes on the mountain. And every once in a while, the mountain's just a hill. So I'm never as finished as it used to feel finishing a song, but it was also sort of this relentless looking into the future, knowing exactly what you're going to be doing for a really long time.
Yeah. And that can be a slightly stifling, depending on, the character of the person.
Yeah. And I tried to be good about taking weekends off and having some sort of break. And having kids, there's always stuff going on. But I feel it's all much more fluid now, which I think is good.
Yeah, I like that. So what's briefly, can you explain what a sort of typical work day?
Well, we just said there's no such thing.
Give us a sort of a cinematic kind of experience of Andrew Scheps' day in the life.
God, I don't know. I mean, it's basically wake up, do something to move around a little bit, and then sit in front of a computer until dinner, and then possibly sit in front of a computer after dinner, or not. So, I mean, that really is it. And whether I spend the entire day mixing or the entire day writing code or trying to catch up on emails or something, usually it's a mix. And then stuff will just come up. Like if there's something going on at the house that I need to deal with, or I got to mow the lawn. I'm a magpie. Something shiny happens and I just go do that.
Yeah.
And it's really great. Though sometimes I find myself doing it a little too much and I have to buckle down and okay, you're going to go do this right now.
Yeah. Is that a procrastination thing? Because I find myself cleaning the house when I need to get so many more things done.
Well, it's kind of a procrastination thing, but in the longer term, I never procrastinate. I hate knowing I have stuff to do, so I'm very good at just doing it. But within the course of a day or a couple of days, I'm very good at avoiding things.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So do you have a to-do list?
Sometimes it does get out of hand. There are times when I've been talking to my manager and we just sort of do a catch up, okay, we go down the list and he'll mention something and I've completely forgotten about it.
Gosh.
It doesn't happen that often, but sometimes it's just because instead of it being oh, you're mixing a record, it's 2 songs for one artist, one for another, and they'll be spread across, and some are Atmos and some are stereo, and I'll just forget. Usually I don't, but it does happen every once in a while.
Yeah, fair enough. But you have someone to remind you, which is always helpful.
Yeah, it is very helpful.
Brilliant. So you actually mentioned that you do climbing and a bit of yoga, but you're not a yogi.
I am definitely not a yogi. It turns out my hamstrings are about 3 inches long.
Oh, right.
It was, you know what? It was part of the move. In LA, it felt very intimidating to go to a yoga class. So my wife and I always kind of wanted to, and she went to a couple of different exercise things, but I'm sure it isn't this way, but it felt like, oh, you should already be good at it before you take the class, instead of having absolutely no idea what you're doing. So when we moved over here, one of the first things we did is my wife found a yoga teacher not far away, and it turns out she's absolutely amazing. And then a few years ago, I realized that other than yoga an hour and a half a week, I was doing absolutely nothing. And I got off my ass and I joined a gym. And at the gym, the treadmills, the main gym is upstairs, and you're overlooking climbing walls. They actually have climbing walls at the gym. And I would just stare at them for about a year and a half. And then I finally decided, no, I'm going to go learn how to do this. So I went and did, their little 4-evening intro thing. And I am seriously hooked. It's amazing because when you're on a treadmill, all you do is think about other stuff. When you're climbing, all you do is think about climbing.
Yeah.
There's nothing else you can do. It's really thinky, the problem solving. And
it's really good for being in the moment, I imagine.
Yeah, it is. And it's also great for a sense of accomplishment. You're working on something and you get this one move that 2 weeks ago you couldn't even begin to do. And all of a sudden, I can climb that now. And I've climbed outside once.
I was going to ask.
Yeah.
What's that like?
It's great. When you climb inside, everything's color-coded. And when you climb outside, everything is brown. And you have to really search for it. So I really want to do more of that. But you need people to go with you. You cannot go climb outdoors on your own.
That sounds quite dangerous.
Yeah.
But exciting.
Yeah, it really is. It's, I don't know. I'm hooked and I'm obsessed, but I'm really, really glad I started doing it because I could see myself getting so bored at the gym that exercising for the sake of it was not going to carry on forever. But this, it won't carry on forever because I'll stop being able to do it. But at the moment, I'm very much enjoying it.
Good. Yeah. No, that sounds like fun and, like you say, accomplishment as well.
Yeah.
The Production Expert Podcast is made possible using the new Source Nexus suite from Source Elements, the professional way to collaborate over the internet, along with high-definition, low-latency audio and video. Need to record an interview or a podcast, or collaborate with others for songwriting, review and approval, remote editing, and more. With Source Nexus Suite, using any browser, you'll get studio-quality audio and video, along with custom-built tools for seamless integration with your DAW. Pricing starts at free. Get your account today at sourceelements.com.
Let's talk a bit about workflow tips and, getting into the creative flow that you speak a lot about, that sort of flow state. But do you have, any tips?
Well, I mean, the first tip is sound flow. I can't recommend sound flow enough because for everything we do, especially because we're all mixing on computers now, there's repetitive stuff that you do, and you do it over and over. And it's the kind of thing that's actually soul destroying if there's enough of it. And there's the obvious big stuff like prepping sessions, but there are hundreds of little things that you do all the time. Like you get sent a bunch of stems and they're all stereo, and you've got all these pairs of stereo stems where only the left channel is used on one of them and only the right channel on the other, and you need to split them apart and then put those two together to make one stereo track that has all the audio. And it's not that big a deal, but when you're prepping an entire album and you've got 60 stems per song and you got to go through them, it sucks. It just sucks. And so I spent the time and wrote myself a script that does it. And now it's almost fun. You select the tracks, you hit a keystroke, and they separate themselves and they copy the audio onto a new. It's just, yeah, it's really good. That kind of thing takes what starts off being a chore and to the point where sometimes you don't even bother doing it. Like, I can't do this again. I'll just deal with the mess. And it turns it into something that's so fast and it actually makes you happy while you're doing the stuff that used to make you really sad. So anything that's repetitive, that is not creative, you want to automate that as much as possible.
Definitely.
At least I do. I really find that if I've got to prep an entire record manually, I can't work on it then for another couple days because it just sucks so much.
It sort of sucks the creative life out of you, doesn't it? Because it's kind of like a different mindset, not a different brain, but, you know, a different approach. It's like when I'm feeling very technical, I'm not necessarily thinking too creatively. So I have sort of one day to do songwriting, another day to do mixing. I don't know if it's the same with you, obviously, in terms of creative versus organizational approaches.
Yeah, it does within the same thing. And by that, I mean, when I'm mixing, prepping sessions is its own chunk of time. I would just go through and prep the entire record, and then I can go back and start mixing. If I can't just open a session and start mixing, then it's very hard to get started. But I can mix all day and be completely worn out with that side of my brain and then go write code for 4 or 5 hours. I mean, that's what I did all the way through lockdown, is I just basically had 2 work days every day. And that's different enough that it's absolutely fine.
But because I remember I heard you actually speaking about this, and it's fascinating. Because you actually said that they're both creative, but they're different parts of the brain. So I'd be interested to know what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, a neurologist might say, no, you're an idiot. It's all the same neurons. But they're both creative, but in completely different ways. And I think that I have horrible imposter syndrome. So while I'm mixing, there's always this cloud of what if they hate it? And I can usually ignore it and just really try and make it something that I think is great based on what I know about what I think they want. But with code, nobody has any idea what you're doing until, at least as far as you know, it works. And obviously there are bugs, and if other people are going to use the software, you've got to do a lot of error correction, and, you know, all this stuff that isn't the sort of more creative part of it. But it is this knowable problem.
It's like objectivity versus subjectivity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can think of a mix as the best thing I've ever done, and the artist can just go, that sucks. And they're right. You know, in the context of their album, they are right, and I can't argue with it.
I know, but it can be soul destroying, and it's so good to hear someone like you saying about, you know, imposter syndrome. I was actually speaking with Tony Perry. I don't know if you know him from Windmill Lane Studios in Dublin.
Yeah.
He's a lovely guy, and he's also been doing it for decades. But he says that he still over prepares every session and still has imposter syndrome. And so many incredibly successful engineers and producers have imposter syndrome. So it's almost like it doesn't go away. If anything, it probably gets worse. Yeah,
it's definitely gotten worse for me. What's interesting is the other thing I did during lockdown was a series of interviews. Andrew Talks to Awesome People, which is a terrible name, but I had to come up with it like the first day of lockdown. So I had all of these really long interviews with a lot of amazing producers and engineers. And a lot of them do have imposter syndrome. And then the ones who didn't even know what I was talking about. Like, it made no sense to them. So there are, you know, I'm sure there's a spectrum of imposter syndrome, but it's weird how nobody just has a little bit. You either have it or you don't. And it's either crippling or it isn't if you do have it. But it's, there were certain people I talked to who just like, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I don't have that.
Did they have anything in common? Did you notice that they were sort of similar in any ways?
Or? No, not at all.
So I wonder what causes imposter syndrome then, because it's definitely not sort of experience.
Yeah, I don't know if it has anything to do with like what we do. I think it can get beaten into you. I think like mine is much worse than it used to be, just because of how my career path went and the pressure. I mean, I'm not going to complain about my career path at all. I've been unbelievably lucky, and it's fantastic, and I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
But there were definitely stretches where the scrutiny was insane compared to earlier when I was doing much lower impact projects, but like hanging out at home with friends and doing stuff. Then that turned into stuff where if you failed, you know, you were failing in public, basically. So It got worse, but it was always there. I mean, even from being a kid, there was always there.
So it was the sort of the pressure of publicly being, feeling sort of shamed potentially, or
Yeah, I don't know. It's just you want, I want everybody to like what I do. And of course that's impossible. If you do something that everybody likes, you'd be the first person in the history of people to do that.
Yeah.
But that's what that's what drives me a lot of the time. And it's a terrible thing to have drive you, because then you can find yourself starting to do what you think people want as opposed to what you think is right to do. And I am talking about mixing. I don't want to get into, the rest of life on this, but it's obviously applicable. But yeah, I need to always be doing what I'm doing. And that's why I love the fact that I am, in fact, mixing on my own in a room and nobody hears anything until I'm ready for people to hear it. But as I'm getting to the point where I'm about to send it, then it all creeps in, and I will sometimes go change something based on that. And I'm not saying I'm making a bad decision about that, but it's always there.
Oh, it's amazing hearing you say that, because I think a lot of people listening as well will be like, maybe I'm not very good, especially if they're just sort of starting out or they're not as far into their careers. But it can be terrifying delivering a mix to the point where sometimes you think, what am I doing? Why am I even doing this? Like, I'm useless.
Yeah, look, I send mixes sometimes at times of day where I know they're not going to listen for at least several hours. Because that's like my break. Like, I think I've done it, I've sent it, I think it's great, and no one's told me otherwise. So,
yes.
But you bring up a really interesting point, though, is that obviously everybody's view on your mixes, for instance, is completely subjective, and they like what they like. But you have to be objective about your own work as far as you are concerned. Because otherwise you'll think like, well, they're just, I'll send it now and see what they say. But you can't do that. You have to think that if you were the only person who was ever going to have to comment on it, that it was amazing and finished, and there's no point in working on it anymore. If you don't get to that point, you can't send it out into the world, because then, nothing makes sense at that point.
Yeah. Especially a lot of artists and they don't actually understand how to listen to an unfinished mix. So it's important that you get it at least as near finished as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. To expect people to have imagination when they're listening to their song changed is insane. It just won't happen.
This podcast is sponsored by Genelec. If you've ever been disappointed with the way your mixes sound on other playback systems, then check out Genelec's Unio monitoring ecosystem. By providing a seamless bridge between loudspeaker and headphone monitoring, Unio allows you to quickly create great sounding mixes that translate consistently wherever you choose to work. No more guesswork, no more surprises, just truthful, accurate audio monitoring from stereo to immersive. To find out more, visit genelec.com/Unio, spelt UNIO. Your mixers will thank you for it.
Dealing with dick clients. I think I've heard you refer to them as that before. Do you have any tips on how to deal with them, particularly for those struggling with, imposter syndrome and trying to please people?
Well, I think that hopefully, being able to read people is a really important skill in what we do. And if you can, at least in your own mind, figure out, are they being a dick to be a dick, or are they being a dick because they don't know how to describe what it is they want, but they really, really, really want the thing they want? If there's an artistic vision, even if you disagree with it or think it's stupid, if that's what's driving it, then you just go down the rabbit hole, unless it turns out that personally they're being a dick as well. And then at some point, you just have to decide what you can put up with and what you can't. And usually when you call them on it, like, look, we're going around in circles, let's just make this the last revision, and, whatever it is, usually the people sort of like, oh, yeah, no, you're right, and you get somewhere. Every once in a while, that's not the case, and then it's just up to you to decide. And for me, if there are comments on a mix, it's because I haven't gotten it right as far as they're concerned. And that, to me, is a truth, and I have to stick to that. So unless I find out or think I found out, they're just making me do it because they're thinking we can make Andrew Scheps do stuff. If that's not the motivation, then I just have to keep going and try and get it right. And it can be depressing because you really don't know what people are going for. But anyway.
That's so interesting. And in terms of ref mix as well, do you listen to a lot of reference mixes, or do you sort of, go by fit? Because I know you talk a lot about emotion and stuff. So
yeah, I don't listen to reference mixes only because sonically they confuse me. Now, it means that every once in a while, I do end up in a sonic rabbit hole where, with perspective, it's like, wow, what the hell was I thinking? In terms of there's no low end, or this instrument is crazy loud or crazy quiet. And I've had, there was a batch of songs I mixed for a band, and when I sent them, they're like, is something broken? Because the guitars are so quiet. And I went back and listened like, oh my God. But I'd listened before I sent them, but my brain was so used to where I'd gotten them to. But I don't think listening to someone else's mix would necessarily help. It's just not the way my brain works. There are people, though, who definitely benefit from listening to reference mixes.
Yeah, for A-Bing purposes.
Yeah.
In terms of leveling out the bass and stuff like that. But in terms of taking breaks as well and just sort of resetting, do you do any particular things like, I think I've heard you say go away for a few days. I do that as well. Not listen to anything in terms of the mix for a few days so you have a fresh perspective.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be a few days, though. It's one of the things I love about mixing an entire record at once is that as soon as you feel like you're losing perspective, unless you're in the middle of something, you just close that song and open up another song, because you get perspective. I can get perspective 2 or 3 times a day on the same song just by doing something else in between. But unless you really feel like you're making, the big thing for me is if I'm not making progress, I have to just close the session, because otherwise I'm going to tinker and then I'm messing stuff up because I'm doing things for absolutely no reason. And if it's not led by what I'm hearing, then just leave it. And when I think I'm getting close to done, I'll listen quietly and it'll be looping and I'll check emails. And then all of a sudden something will be like, wow, that's crazy. And then you go deal with it. Because it'll hold its hand up eventually. But yeah, you do need to have perspective.
Yeah, definitely. That brings me to another point in terms of balance. How long do you tend to spend on sort of balancing out a mix? Because there's some people that like to do it sort of really quickly. What's your take on that?
In terms of general balance, I do try and do it fast. Well, I don't even try and do it fast. I do it quickly because basically while I'm prepping, and I prep all my own sessions, and it's work that it would be nice if someone else would do it and I could pay them to do it and that'd be great. But just due to circumstances, I've done that a few times, and then it turns out they're all super talented and they go off and have careers, which sucks for me and is amazing for them. But anyway, so I'm learning the material while I'm prepping. I always, unless there's something really weird going on, I will not mix a song that there isn't a rough mix of, because there's no direction. And so I learn what's going on while I'm prepping. And then at that point, I can be balanced sort of by the time I'm done prepping. Then usually I turn the vocals off, deal with everything else, and then the vocals come back in. And I'm just lucky that I think my brain always allows space for the vocals. So I don't often have major structural stuff that I've screwed up because the vocals weren't in.
Right.
If anything, it's more like, oh, okay, there's a gigantic slab of background vocals, so the keyboard pads don't need to be as big. But I mean, that's not a big deal. A little bit of EQ and turn it down and you're done. So I think that having the balance for everything but vocals at the very least, very quickly, and working with everything in, unless you really just need to hear a thing, is super important for me. Yeah,
definitely. So we've spoken, obviously, these tips apply to stereo or Atmos, but you do a lot of Atmos these days. So in terms of, general rules for things, I know within stereo, people like to keep things kick and bass sort of mono and centered. In terms of panning and EQ, and obviously reverb as well, we can get to, are there any particular rules that you're finding in Atmos that are the same or perhaps different to stereo?
There are, because the headphone version of it is so important. So I think a lot of the stereo, like left, right, trying to balance the arrangement so it doesn't sound crazy in headphones, I think those things still exist. I think that the learning curve of the phantom center versus an actual center speaker, and even in the binaural render of any of the immersive formats, putting something in the center is totally different than having it in the left, right, and having a phantom image. And so learning how to deal with that, what can survive going in different places. And on speakers, though, I'm finding more and more that I can do things. But I feel like the biggest thing for me is not to tear the song apart. And rhythmically, that's very easy to do. Arrangement-wise, it's very easy to do with a bunch more speakers. So you'll end up with things isolated that are distracting, and the thing that they used to be part of is now missing them. And it just ruins the groove of the song or the feel of the verse. And so, like, what do you do with harmony vocals? And sometimes they need to be tucked in right next to the lead vocal, and sometimes they can be in the back, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I think the only sort of rule for me is that the left, center, right is the front wall, and 90% of the time, that's where the song lives. So if you turned off all the other speakers, you could listen top to bottom, and maybe the arrangement would seem a little not one note, that's a terrible way to put it, but it would still work, and you would have an idea of what's going on. But other than that, I think it's the Wild West in a really good way, but you have to make sure it works in headphones. And I do hear mixes where in headphones they're just weird and they're not that fun to listen to. And considering that's how most people are going to hear it, I think you've got to pay enough attention to that so that doesn't happen.
Well, that's all we have time for, but thank you very much to Andrew, and we'll be back next week for part 2. Have a great week.